I have some booms for you today. Booms relating to the world of global public health and specifically related to the pandemic. By the end, I'm sure you'll see why we call it plandemic. I've already done videos about this, I know, but this is all new information and I haven't seen some of this covered anywhere. The information is going to include new background on Event 201, on Anthony Fauci. We're going to talk more about Bill Gates and some of the characters we've already discussed. But what is being revealed, not just by myself, but tons of excellent research out there. But what is being revealed, in my opinion, is that the world of global public health in general, is run like a mafia. It's like there's a Don somewhere and he's got all these families that go by NGO names, that go by world body names. These are like mafia families. And they're using money laundering and extortion and a kind of a protection racket scheme to cripple nation states and at the same time, of course, enrich themselves. So that's where we're going today. And like I say, boom, boom, boom. I believe there's some really shocking information in here. The only way I know how to tell this story to you is to kind of go through how I discovered it. And so the first thing that led me to what I'm going to cover today was this. I don't know if you caught this thing. It was a 2.5 hour long telethon sort of thing. This pledging event, they called it, hosted by Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the EU. Over the course of this 2.5 hours, they had a whole string of world leaders that sounded like they were reading hostage notes, that they were given a script and they had to read this thing to the camera and give up, in the end, $8 billion of taxpayer money, all told from all of their citizens. So you and I are paying for this thing. Just listen to a select few world leaders and what it sounded like to listen to them.
Better diagnostics, treatments, and a safe and effective vaccine.
COVID-19 diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines.
Largement du développement et du déploiement rapide de diagnostics, vaccins et traitements efficaces.
Universal access to vaccination, treatment, and diagnostics.
Equitable access to new COVID diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccine.
We must all work together on improving diagnostics, accelerating therapies, and ultimately developing a vaccine.
We need to make vaccines, treatment, and diagnostics accessible to everyone.
Vaccines, treatments, and diagnosis will be the most effective way to do it.
We need new diagnostics, vaccines, treatments, and an equal distribution to all.
On equitable access to diagnostics, treatments, and vaccines.
And affordability of the vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics.
In order to develop adequate treatments and vaccine.
I don't know about you, but that was embarrassing for me to hear them back to back saying basically the same thing that they were obviously told to say by somebody. The question is, who is that somebody? Where is this money that's being pledged going? Well, I do have an answer for you for that. I'll get to that a little later. But the interesting thing about this pledging event was that in addition to the world leaders, Ursula von der Leyen also had on testimonials from the people who are going to be benefiting from this. And here's Ursula von der Leyen, just really quickly, introducing each one of them so you get to familiarize yourselves with the names of the organizations.
For the World Health Organization, Director General Dr. Tedros. And now we move on to the World Bank, the World Economic Forum. For the International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. For Gavi, the Vaccines Alliance. For the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, CEPI. Without you, Victor, my friend, all this would not have happened.
I'm Victor Zhao, President of the U.S. National Academy of Medicine and a board member of GPMB, the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board.
The one that set me off on this journey today was the very last one there. Victor Zhao. Victor Zhao, who they said was president of the National Academy of Medicine and a board member of the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board. And I thought to myself, I've never heard of the monitoring board, but why would she say,
"Without you, Victor, my friend, all this would not have happened"?
So I thought it's worth a look into Victor Zhao's background. So that's what we're going to start with. Victor Zhao, first of all, he was born in China, and I'm sorry, but in today's day and age, when we understand subversion and we understand how China has slowly compromised the United States, it's significant, in my opinion, that Victor Zhao was born in China and that his father owned a chemical manufacturing company. Well, chemical manufacturing, that is big pharma. Most people, I guess, well, I don't know. I used to think of chemical manufacturing as chemicals. I didn't put it together that it was drugs and poisons and insecticides and things like that. But that's what it is. So that's Victor Zhao's family. He's also married to a very progressive, I think, Jewish woman, which I'm only mentioning because he's won awards from the Jewish community, so he's very well supported there as well. But listen to just some of the things Victor Zhao does and did. President of the U.S. National Academy of Medicine, serves as vice chair of the U.S. National Research Council. He's Chancellor Emeritus and James B. Duke Professor of Medicine at Duke. He was also Chairman of Medicine at Harvard, as well as Chairman of Medicine at Stanford U. And he served on the Board of Health Governors of the World Economic Forum and chaired its global agenda. He was also on the advisory committee to the NIH director. And that's significant because Anthony Fauci at the NIAID is in the National Institute of Health as well. And there's so much more that isn't listed in that 2018 biography that I just showed you. So one of the things they talked about was that he is chairman of NAM, the National Academy of Medicine. Just get a load of this logo, by the way. I know medicine is associated with a snake, but it's usually on the caduceus. To remove it from that is a little odd. And to have it arranged so that there are 3 6s showing in the logo, also, it raises a red flag for me. How can it not? I don't know if you can see the 3 6s, and it's hard for me to point them out. The one is right in the middle. You can see that one. Then there's like a big one that is the whole outside, like that. There's the one that comes from the neck of the snake and up and back around this way. Victor appeared at a nurses' conference, and instead of me reading this to you, why don't I let you watch the clip?
So as of July 1, 2014, we reconstituted the National Academies so that the IOM is now a National Academy itself, hence called the National Academy of Medicine. Although we call National Academy of Medicine, I don't want you to have this name fool you to think we only focus on medicine. We are about health. It's a much broader mission. And I want to make sure you get that message. There are many different reasons why we use this name for internal purposes, and etc. The second is to create reports that these recommendations are our recommendations, and frequently, because our work is also commissioned by Congress, by US government, and by global governments, they are the recommendation for policy, for legislation, for law, etc.
Did you notice that he tells them not to be confused by the name? And he said, we use that name for a lot of reasons. It almost is like we need to keep up credibility. We need to keep up appearances. The National Academy of Medicine, which was founded by an act of Congress, is no longer part of the government. Here is how the National Academy of Medicine gets its funding now. From these foundations. Of note, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Wellcome Trust, the Rockefeller Foundation, the U.S. State Department through the USAID, And the World Economic Forum, you will notice, is part of the oversight group. Some of these double up. The Wellcome Trust is part of the oversight group. The Rockefeller is part of the oversight group. To me, when I discovered that, that was a boom. The National Academy of Medicine is actually a 501c3 organization, a foundation, and it's funded by other foundations. And it just so happens it's funded by some of the usual suspects. I mean, just for your reference and records, here is a graphic. All right, the other thing that they said that he was part of is this GPMB, Global Preparedness Monitoring Board, and I was very curious about that as well. It turns out you don't even need to look hard. The GPMB is the World Health Organization and World Bank. You can see it's co-convened in May 2018 by the World Bank Group and the World Health Organization. So it just made itself a seemingly independent organization. So when the public hears it, they're not going to think, oh, that's the World Health Organization again? That's the World Bank again? God, they do a lot of stuff. No. It's a front organization, isn't it? I mean, they don't hide it, but you have to go looking for it to find it. The funders of the GPMB are the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Wellcome Trust, Germany, and this NGO called Resolve to Save Lives, which is run by a guy called Tom Frieden, who is the former head of the CDC and the former New York Health Commissioner. He also worked on Bloomberg Philanthropies. We're not going to talk very much about him today. That's left for another dig. On the GPMB website, we see that they had commissioned several organizations to write them reports about global health. And those organizations are down here: Red Cross, Johns Hopkins, Chatham House, Wellcome. And believe it or not, they even asked themselves, the World Bank and the World Health Organization, to write these reports. Down here, they specifically thank a guy called Tim Evans, and we're going to get to him in a minute. Just remember that they said that. Here's the reports that resulted from this commissioning. I just want to draw your attention to this particular one, which was written by the Independent Oversight Committee for the WHO Health Emergencies Program. The title of it is From Never Again to the New Normal. That's kind of creepy, because aren't they constantly saying that to us right now? The new normal, the new normal. And that report was written before this one, which came out in September 2019. I know that because this report, written by the GPMB, took the results of all of these and then made sort of a synopsis document here. I'm going to give you now a very quick look at their 7 most important points that came out of all of those reports. You're going to love it. The GPMB says 7 urgent actions to prepare the world for health emergencies. They must prioritize and dedicate domestic resources and recurrent spending for preparedness towards the Sustainable Development Goals. That's point 1 of what the GPMB wants, and what all those other 7 organizations recommended as well. Remember that. So here's points 2 and 3. Countries and regional organizations must lead by example and follow through on their political and funding commitments. They must build strong systems. This is point number 3. The heads of government must use a whole of government and whole of society approach. They must prioritize community involvement in all preparedness efforts, building trust and engaging multiple stakeholders. I don't like this whole of government plus whole of society approach to preparedness, because what does that sound like? That sounds like totalitarianism. And isn't that what it feels like we're living under today, with everybody get out at 8 o'clock and clap? Oh, clap and show your commitment to our preparedness efforts or our response efforts. Wear the mask or else you're a pariah. Snitch on your neighbors if they're not doing what they're supposed to do. Yeah, it reminds me of what we're going through today a lot. Here's points 4 and 5, which also have to do with funding. They must ensure adequate investment in developing innovative vaccines and therapeutics. and more financing. Money for the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, and also, down here where the arrow is, funding replenishments of the IDA, Global Fund to Fight AIDS, TB, and Malaria, and Gavi. Gavi and the Global Fund, those are Bill and Melinda Gates efforts. And the IDA, well, I noticed that it had a very similar logo to the World Bank. And of course, that's because it is part of the World Bank. And here's just more. Increase funding. That's point number 6. You see how they worked it. The World Health Organization and the World Bank created this seemingly independent body called the GPMB. And then the GPMB puts out a call for reports. And they ask Johns Hopkins, Chatham House, Wellcome, International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent, and the World Bank and the World Health Organization to write these reports. And then this organization aggregates the results of these reports and makes another report in which it recommends increasing funding to all the people who fund the GPMB and the World Bank and the World Health Organization. I wanted to have a closer look at one of those reports. So I opened up to the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, and it dawned on me, Johns Hopkins is the organization who put on Event 201. The Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, in partnership with the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, hosted Event 201, a high-level pandemic planning exercise on October 18th, 2019. What? And wait a second. This report from the GPMB came out in September 2019. And October, they held the pandemic planning exercise. Now remember I told you it's good to remember Tim Evans was thanked particularly by the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board he used to work at the World Bank? Okay, there's Tim right there. Tim also appeared at Event 201. We're not going to get into his background right now. What I want to do instead is play you a clip of Tim speaking as a panelist at the Event 201.
Everybody gets excited around a table like this in the moment, and then you move on, and it's back to business as usual. And it's this panicked and neglect problem that we have, which is very difficult to prospectively develop real preparedness. So I think there should be somewhere, maybe it's out of the GPMB, and a number of people here are the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board.
The GPMB is the World Health Organization and World Bank. When the public hears it, they're not going to think, oh, that's the World Health Organization again? That's the World Bank again? It's a front organization.
There should be a time-bound plan with very clear targets with respect to what would constitute a new level of global preparedness. And we should look at what's required to get that financed, but that it has some real accountability to agents that lie behind or are advocating for stronger global governance.
What was his main point? We need to get that financed.
To get that financed,
he said. He laments the fact that they do these planning things, but because there's never pandemics, people don't tend to follow through on their funding. So they need something that's going to get this financed for once, he says, right? In October 2019, Tim Evans of the World Bank, that was his main concern. And you saw that Bill and Melinda Gates were sponsors of that project, Event 201, and all the reports that went into it. This writer on May 2nd wonders why Bill Gates is denying Event 201. Now, it's not like Bill Gates was asked about Event 201 and then said, no, I know nothing about this, it never happened. But what he did say was, on April 12th, 2020, Bill Gates said in an interview to the BBC, quote, now here we are, we didn't simulate this, we didn't practice, so both the health policies and economic policies, we find ourselves in uncharted territory. Which is not true, because Event 201 was very extensive, and it focused very much on economics, financing, but what it really, really focused on if you watched it, if you've seen my videos and others, you'll know, was controlling the message. It wanted to flood the zone with their own propaganda.
A couple of strategies that are available to us, one of which is the flood strategy.
And flooding good information.
Flood the zone.
Flood.
A manifestation of flood.
Flood good information.
Flood the zone.
And what have we seen? We've seen nonstop coronavirus messaging everywhere. They're also censoring anything that goes counter or exposes them. For example, my video on Event 201 that I did months ago, which got almost 400,000 views, ixnay. They're also trying really hard to censor Judy Mikovits's anything she does. They try to censor it because she's exposing Dr. Anthony Fauci for the fraud that he is. Now, why would Bill Gates want to deny Event 201? Well, maybe because if you look at it, you'll see that the guy from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, there he is right there. You want to look at the Event 201 players? Christopher Elias, along with Timothy Evans and many others. Chris Elias, he is the face of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I thought to myself, while I'm looking at board members, let's look at the board members of the GPMB, the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board, who we now know was involved in the background setup of Event 201. Let's look at the board. Well, there's Victor Zhao, there's Chris Elias again, and there's Jeremy Farrar. Hang on. There's Jeremy Farrar. Wow, I'm starting to see a massive pattern emerge, aren't you? And this guy, George Gao, he was also at the Event 201 as one of the players. And he is from China's CDC, China's Center for Disease Control. But you notice, I blacked one of the people out. I redacted them. And that's because I want you to have been fully prepared for the boom. Are you ready? Who lies behind the redaction? Anthony Fauci. Anthony Fauci, the guy leading the coronavirus task force. You guys all already know who he is, but there he is on the board of the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board, who was responsible for commissioning all of those reports, all of the reports that gets funding from these guys over here, which made its own report that eventually translated to Event 201. There he is there with all the usual suspects. Boom. All right. Gosh, this is getting long. And I still haven't covered all the other booms. Just in case you weren't aware, Anthony Fauci gave an interesting speech at Georgetown University shortly after Trump was inaugurated, and here's what he had to say.
I thought I would bring that perspective to the topic today, is the issue of pandemic preparedness. And if there's one message that I want to leave with you today, based on my experience, and you'll see that in a moment, is that there is no question that there will be a challenge to the coming administration in the arena of infectious diseases, both chronic infectious diseases in the sense of already ongoing disease, and we have certainly a large burden of that, but also there will be a surprise outbreak. And
He had no doubt that there would be a surprise pandemic. How can you have no doubt that there will be a surprise? It's a contradiction in terms. But yeah, isn't that very interesting? And just let me add this little part.
So from my own personal experiences, why I can say with some confidence that history tells us that we will definitely get surprised in the next few years. So it all started for me when I became director of NIAID, and that was in 1984. And I had my graphics people do a sort of a map of the United States of America, and I put on the map this new emerging infectious disease, which is HIV/AIDS. And I take that map, and one way or another, every single time I testify before the Congress, particularly for my budget, almost always for my budget, and I talk about global health and emerging infectious diseases, I add one, sometimes two, sometimes three, either new diseases or re-emerging diseases.
He's kind of just laying it bare right there. Every time he had to go up in front of Congress for his budget, he would just add in infectious diseases onto his map. Yeah, that works, I guess, Anthony? It shows that he doesn't even see what we see when we hear him say that. Just another little bit about Anthony Fauci before we move on. He was at the Bill and Melinda Gates Global Grand Challenges Scientific Board. He was on their board from 2003 to 2010, directly for Bill and Melinda Gates, for 7 years. That was a little while back, but they obviously have a tight relationship. And we find along the way that in addition to Victor Zhao, we also have Anthony Fauci as a board member of this organization. And in the end, we're going to see more connections. So let's keep going. Now remember, this all started because I was looking at this coronavirus global pledging event, and I wanted to know more about Dr. Victor Zhao. We already know quite a bit about him, but there's more you don't know. He also is on the board of this organization called Research America. And in this organization's website, I found a celebration of this CEPI organization, Connecting Curiosity to Cures. CEPI hopes to eradicate epidemics. This was written in February 2017. And we look down here, and sure enough, it's founded by the Gates Foundation, Wellcome Trust, World Economic Forum, and the governments of Norway and India, it says. CEPI is currently led by an interim board made up of internationally renowned experts in the fields of public health, vaccine development, and infectious diseases, including Research America board member and president of the National Academy of Medicine, Dr. Victor Zhao. Mind blown. I wanted to learn more about CEPI. First of all, I want to know how one man can possibly do all of this. Do you think perhaps he's a representative of other interests? I wonder who those other interests might be, because I find it hard to believe that he could do a quality job at any of this all at once. But I digress. I wanted to see if indeed that was who really founded CEPI, so I looked a little further, and I found this clip from the World Economic Forum.
I am delighted to welcome you to this conversation about the work of the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovation, which is, I have to say, one of the more extraordinary initiatives to come out of Davos recently. It was born out of a conversation a year ago. It's a concrete initiative between governments, foundations, and the private sector. Governments of Norway, Germany, Japan, and India. Two of the biggest foundations in the world, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Wellcome Trust Foundation. Strong support from the world's 6 biggest pharmaceutical companies, GSK, Merck, Johnson & Johnson, Sanofi, Takeda, and Pfizer.
Okay, so the article in Research America left a few people and organizations out. Namely, they didn't at all mention a couple of the other countries involved, and they didn't mention that it was co-founded by a handful of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies, did they? To me, this is a huge boom, as big as Anthony Fauci. It's very significant because all that money is going to those guys, and those are pharma companies. In this article from May 5th, so the day after the pledging event, it says world leaders, international organizations, and companies have pledged 7.4 billion euros to develop new tools to detect, treat, and prevent the novel coronavirus. Leaders said that each euro or dollar will be channeled through global health organizations such as CEPI, Gavi, the Vaccines Alliance, and the Global Fund and UNITAID. When they were doing this telethon, I thought to myself, well, who is collecting this? The EU? Is the EU collecting it? And then they're going to give it out to who and how and when and where? No, it turns out that those organizations are the ones that's going to collect the money, and then they're going to give it out. Oh, right. Are they? So, when Melinda Gates appeared in her condescending, surreal testimonial on that coronavirus pledging event and said this.
By combining the world's expertise and brain power and resources, we can attack this disease in the way it's attacking us globally. And by working together, we can beat it much faster than if we were working alone. Our foundation is proud to partner with you, and I'm pleased to announce today that we will pledge $100 million towards this effort.
You can see how it isn't generosity at all. She is literally giving that $100 million back to herself. And it's probably the same with all of these organizations. They have ways of translating that money into business gains for them outside of their foundations. Bill and Melinda Gates, as James Corbett just explained on his excellent video, which I will link to in the description box. He just explained that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation exists, but Bill and Melinda Gates also have something called the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Trust, which is where they can profit. And these things work together. They push for vaccines, and in the meantime, they're investing in vaccine companies with their trust. And all of these guys are doing the same thing. Okay. They set all of this up. They set this up as the repository for where they were going to demand we send the money to, right? The World Economic Forum Mafia, basically. The Davos set. That's them again. And then they make this whole sham, pretending there's a whole bunch of different organizations involved, but really it's all just them again, to write reports, which then produces a pandemic planning event where all they really focus on is controlling the message and getting finance. Get this financed.
To get that financed.
Then what happens? Boom! A real coronavirus pandemic happens. Really? Incredible. It's basically like protection money racket. When the mafia comes swinging into town and they go into the new, they go into the pizza parlor and they say, there's a problem around here with your windows getting smashed out. We can help you with that. We can make sure your windows don't get smashed out. And the person says, the pizza parlor owner says, there's no problem. I've never seen anybody's windows get smashed out. And that night after he locks up, sure enough, his windows get smashed out. And now he wishes he had have paid the protection money, right? So this allows them to now say, well, country leaders, we tried to warn you. We tried to get you to pay up before, but now look what's happened. Now everybody's dying in all the hospitals. Now our economies are going in the toilet. Please give us the money now, or it's just going to get worse. And aren't they saying that? It's just going to get worse. This is the new normal. Funny enough, the title of one of the reports that the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board commissioned. Isn't that a coincidence? And sure enough, our leaders are turning tail and ponying up the dough. All right, I have one more little element of this video to share with you relating back to who is Victor Zhao. Do you remember this? I did this video a while back, a couple weeks ago. Beware the contact tracers. And in this video, it showed Clintons, Bill Clinton and Chelsea Clinton, interviewing various people and they were talking about how anyone that tests positive with COVID-19 is going to be called up by an army of contact tracers who are going to quiz them on who they'd talked to and where they'd been. And then they were going to call those people and warn them, you might have been exposed to COVID-19, right? Remember that whole racket? And now we're hearing more and more about it on the news, by the way. Some states are going full throttle with this thing. All right, so this woman that Chelsea Clinton was talking to, her name is Ophelia Dahl, and her organization is called Partners in Health. They were one of the ones that was already hiring contact tracers. They'd already hired 1,000 of them, and they wanted more. Well, it turns out Victor Zhao has a connection back to this. Here he is appearing at McGill University, his alma mater, with his wife, giving a speech because they're opening a new institute there. It's called the School of Population and Global Health. They're starting to really show their eugenics at this point when they're going to put population right in the title, if you ask me. The guest, along with the Zhaos, was a guy called Paul Farmer. And Paul Farmer, as I discussed in my contact tracer video here, is another partner in Partners in Health. He works directly at the same level as Ophelia Dahl, and those two have known each other for years, and so have the Zhaos. Listen to this short clip.
And one thing I would like to say that we've known Paul Farmer for quite some time.
I remember not only meeting Paul many years ago, working with him, but 2004, when I was just arrived at Duke as chancellor, a freshman, he came to Duke. You know, he is a Duke alumnus.
So there you go. But I'm not done. I don't know if you noticed when I showed you Tim Evans's bio earlier. Did you catch one of the highlighted words? McGill. Timothy Evans joined McGill University in September 2019 as the inaugural director and associate dean of the School of Population and Global Health. You're kidding! You're kidding! The gang's all there. I'm going to give you a screen grab that you can have for posterity, but it doesn't explain too much. There's just too many arrows necessary. Here's the shape of it. You can see how many times these faces repeat. The list of who benefits is the same list as the people setting policy and the people pressuring governments to pledge our taxpayer money for their plandemic. Oh yeah, that reminds me. Another little interesting bit from this report commissioned by the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board. It says that their progress indicators by September 2020 would include the United Nations, including the World Health Organization, conducting at least 2 system-wide training and simulation exercises, including one covering the deliberate release of a lethal respiratory pathogen. Boom? Is this all fake? Is this a system-wide training and simulation exercise by the WHO and the United Nations? Is that what this is? And if it is, are we in for another one? Because they said they want at least 2. Could that be why Anthony Fauci was so certain there was going to be a surprise outbreak? Ask yourself how anybody's certain of a surprise. And what about this? U.S. could be in for a bad fall and a bad winter. A second round of the coronavirus is inevitable, says Anthony Fauci. Yeah, well, that would help them, wouldn't it? And it would be true to their plan, put out by the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board that we know Anthony Fauci is a board member of. All right, guys. I'm going to stop talking now. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you could follow it. If you would like to support my work or say thank you for the work you've seen over the past little while, you can drop me a tip at my PayPal.me address, which will be in the description box below. Also, I have a P.O. box where I accept other forms of payment, not payment, just tips. So thank you so much to everybody who has taken the time to do that. I love your letters. I'm going to have to do another mail thing, I think, but maybe I'll just post it on BitChute. I like to kind of keep my channel to newsy stuff. Don't forget to follow me over on BitChute. I will put my link in the description box, and I'm on Twitter at 99freemind. I know I said I was quitting, but I haven't yet. What else can I tell you? I don't know. I'm going to link a bunch of references down in the description box, along with that excellent video by James Corbett exposing more about Bill Gates and the whole scamdemic. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Until next time, peace out.